Could the mother of 16 children pulled from a house in rural Ohio be pregnant again? This news comes as one of the Siders family members begs to get out of jail. I dig into all of the shocking new details. I'm Angenette Levy, and this is Crime Fix. Elizabeth Siders, the mother of 16 children pulled from that house in Vinton County, Ohio, is in jail facing 16 felony counts of child endangering. But Elizabeth Siders' problems don't end with her criminal case. She has another issue she's dealing with right now. I've learned that 33-year-old Elizabeth Siders is pregnant again. Right now, as she sits in jail, she's expecting. And I've confirmed Siders hasn't just given birth to 16 children. That number is actually 18, and birth records prove it. Elizabeth Siders gave birth to a set of twins in November 2022. The baby girls were conjoined, meaning their bodies were fused together, and they shared organs. Those babies died the same day they were born in November 2022. There's actually a grave marker that shows the twins were named Bailey Lee Siders and Faith Siders. So right now, it would appear that Elizabeth Siders is actually pregnant with her 19th child. The children that Elizabeth Siders shares with her husband, Gary Siders Jr., are recovering, and at least one of the children is still in the hospital a little more than a week after they were found as deputies and state agents executed a search warrant at the house on Omer Street. The four Siders family members, Gary Jr. and Elizabeth Siders, and Gary Jr.'s parents, Gary Siders Sr. and Christina Siders, who goes by Lynn, face 16 counts of child endangering for the conditions the children were living in and the condition they were in when they were found. When the four were first arrested, they were actually charged with 17 counts of child endangering, but now that number's 16. I'm wondering if that was because Elizabeth Siders is pregnant. It could be. The four Siders family members were supposed to appear in Vinton County Court this week for a preliminary hearing. That's a hearing where a judge determines whether there is probable cause to show that the crimes were committed, and the judge would then decide if there's enough evidence to send the case to trial. But the Siders waived their right to that hearing. Here's Elizabeth Siders' attorney, Tommy Stolle.
I think it's important to understand, too, that while Attorney Dory Bell and I are out here discussing matters together, and we did have an opportunity for three of the attorneys to meet with the prosecutor and go over some preliminary matters here. These matters are all separate and distinct. So while each of our clients have separately and independently, after consulting with counsel, waived preliminary hearing, we could see some separation in these cases. There's obviously three distinct attorneys who are here today. There are four distinct attorneys who are working these cases. And as Attorney Bell mentioned, on the preliminary basis, the only thing that we are looking at is probable cause. And ultimately, that is something that is going to be presented to the grand jury, and the grand jury also has the standard of probable cause. So, from a procedural standpoint, we are still very early on. None of the attorneys have discovered at this point. But we have discussed some of the material facts with the prosecutor. We're not going to get into those here.
Tommy Stolle says he will file a motion asking that Elizabeth Siders' bond be modified.
I do want to make a point here, and it is my understanding, and I believe it is the prosecutor's understanding as well, that my client, Elizabeth Siders, has no criminal history. So when the court is looking at deciding what a bond is going to be set at, there are factors that are enumerated out for the court for them to help them make that decision. Ultimately, in this case, there's a lot of attention, given the fact that you are all here. And it puts a lot of pressure on the court system and puts a lot of pressure on the media as well. For my client specifically, not having any criminal history, to my knowledge, not having ever been charged with failure to appear, starts to mitigate some of those factors. Some of the things that courts will look at in a case like this is what does that criminal history look like? Have they ever been charged with failure to appear? Because we're trying to determine, is this person a flight risk? At this point in time, we are still not sure, at least at my office, whether my client is a victim herself or not. I have previously stated that she does not necessarily characterize herself as a victim, but the investigation from the prosecutor's office, the investigation from my office is still ongoing. So with all of that, taking all of that into consideration, we anticipate filing a motion to modify this law.
Running a business is tough enough, but why make it harder doing things manually or relying on dozens of apps that don't talk to each other? That's where our sponsor Odoo comes in. Odoo is an all-in-one business management platform with a full suite of integrated apps that seamlessly connect all of your operations from sales and accounting to manufacturing and even shipping. Odoo can automatically generate professional, sleek-looking sales orders, invoices, and vendor bills. And it can automatically assign sales teams, send email updates through each sales stage, and even use AI to pull reports that help with your decision making. For manufacturing, their apps can sync inventory with real-time production and purchase updates so you never run out of stock. And when it comes time for accounting, that's also fully automated. Odoo can create invoices, track expenses, and even summarize data with AI to save you hundreds of hours. The best part, you can choose your apps and even build custom workflows so it's all fully tailored to your business's needs. Take your business to the next level by consulting with an Odoo expert today for free at odoo.com/crimefix. Now, it's still very early in this case, and there are more questions than there are answers. One big question surrounding this case was Children's Services, Ohio's Department of Children and Youth, aware of the Siders family? Were they getting health and medical benefits from the state? That is a question I'm working to answer for you. I've learned the family likely moved around after Children's Services in one county paid them a visit, and the Siders didn't want the children taken away. The 4 Siders family members could face even more charges after the case is presented to a grand jury. Right now, they've pleaded guilty to the child endangering charges. Remember, there was a search warrant executed at the home for a separate investigation. That's how the children were discovered. That search warrant and affidavit remain sealed for that investigation. But we know that investigation is not related to 4 misdemeanor public indecency charges that Gary Siders Jr. faces for alleged incidents in May at his home. Another new development in this case, the Vinton County prosecutor, William Archer, has asked the court for help to prosecute the Siders. Archer filed a request with the court asking that the Attorney General's office and an elected prosecutor from another county, Highland County prosecutor Annika Collins, be appointed to assist with the case. That raises the question, will this Vinton County prosecutor, William Archer, actually stay on the case? The Siders children who've been released from the hospital have been placed with foster families. Some of the children remain hospitalized, but some of the older Siders children were actually active on social media. They have accounts where they displayed images from anime and even used cats as their profile photos. But the children never posted any photos of themselves, which raises even more questions. Why were the children on social media and given phones to access it? The attorney for the grandfather, Gary Sr., has filed a motion asking that his bail be modified and lowered so he can post some form of bail to be released from jail. Attorney Dorian Baum says his client is 73 and will appear at future court dates and comply with GPS monitoring.
I mean, obviously, in nearly any case where your defendant or client is being held in jail and wants reduced, at this point, it's already made quite clear that concerns about Mr. Siders' competence, whether he is suffering from mental health issues, from diminished capacity, etc. So, to be perfectly blunt, if a person like that is sitting in jail, that is a bit of an affront to me. I don't think he belongs in jail. I think right now he belongs out of jail so he can address those medical issues or mental health issues he's dealing with. And to be perfectly blunt, if he is not competent, he is not going to be used as a prosecutor, if at all, able to prosecute, in which case he's now just sitting in jail as someone who's incompetent. So
we now know that Gary Siders Sr. was taken to the hospital on July 7th, and that motion to modify his bail was granted. He's in the hospital receiving more specialized care, according to the judge. One Siders family member told a local TV station that his family was not aware of the conditions the children were living in, and that Gary Sr. and Christina Siders didn't raise their children this way.
Last time we heard from them, we gave them a car, and it's probably close to a year ago now. Other than them Lynn calling us and asking for money, or they needed help with the water bill, or whatever. And if we had it, we sent it. If we didn't, one of the other daughters did. So we've done what we could for that family at the arm's length that they was keeping us at.
So I'd like to bring in Mark Weaver. We have talked about this case before. He sits as a judge in the state of Ohio, also works as a prosecutor and as a special prosecutor, and has prosecuted cases down in Southeast Ohio, but not in Benton County. Mark, since the last time we talked, we've confirmed that indeed these 16 children are the offspring of both Elizabeth and Gary Jr. She's been pregnant nearly every year since 2008, and they had another set of twins that were born conjoined and then passed away shortly after birth. So they have a total of 18 children. Your thoughts?
Well, it's remarkable. We read accounts of earlier American history where frontier families had 10, 12, 15, 20 children, many of whom didn't survive because the healthcare system was so dilapidated and weak at the time of those incidents in American history. But in modern times, most hospitals can keep babies alive and make sure they thrive. And so most of us both on the air and watching right now would say we just simply don't know any women who've had this many children. Even when you count in twins and some people have triplets, it's just nearly unheard of in modern America.
Most certainly. So she's had a total of 18 children. There is some talk out there, and we're working to confirm this, that she may be pregnant right now. We don't know that for certain, but there is some discussion about that. So that's a lot of children, and I'm trying to figure out what the motivation would be to have so many children in this day and age, especially if you can't afford to take care of them.
Yeah, well, before I talk about that, let's just point out there are special problems that arise from a pregnant inmate. Both as an acting judge and a magistrate and a prosecutor, I've seen situations where we have pregnant inmates, and often jails won't take them. They present their own unique health problem that most rural jails are simply ill-equipped to handle. So she may get bond on that basis alone. I don't know. She's obviously differently situated if, in fact, she's pregnant. But the notion of having so many children, one after the other, suggests these are low IQ people. That's already been raised by one of the defense counsels for the elder Siders. That somehow there's an IQ problem here. Some of the social media posts from other family members have raised IQ as a problem. So those of us who are more functioning and educated, understanding the world, recognize that you don't want to keep having children if you can't afford to have the children. But it's possible that somebody with a lower IQ or a lesser understanding of logic and how the world works might just keep having sex without birth control and having babies.
Yeah, and you would think in this day and age, when you go to the hospital to have a baby, that they would advise you on birth control, but also you don't know if they knew the full history. I would assume they would ask, how many children have you had when you go in to deliver children or babies, but I'm not sure about that. You mentioned Gary Siders Sr.'s motion to modify the bail. And so his attorney, Dorian Baum, we had him on the other day, said that, he has some concerns about his potential competency, has mobility issues, but he's basically saying, look, this guy, he's 73 years old. He is not basically a threat to anybody. He will make all court appearances. He'll wear the GPS bracelet. They're asking to modify his bail. But then the question is, where does he go? I'm assuming maybe he has a family member who will take him in. But what do you make of his request for bail for Gary Sr.?
I did read the motion for modification of bond. Several things popped up. One is, early on, the defense counsel raises this notion that perhaps Mr. Siders won't be competent to stand trial. But then later he says he fully, meaning Mr. Siders, understands all the charges being brought against him. trying to use that as a reason for why he ought to be able to be released, and he'll return, for the different court settings. Those two concepts obviously are at odds with one another. You can't be setting up an incompetency defense and then say, but by the way, my client knows very well this is a big case, he needs to come back. One thing that was not mentioned in that motion, I'm sure the prosecutor will raise to the judge, is one of the things that's considered when modifying bond is whether or not this defendant is a flight risk, whether or not he has a reason to flee the state, flee the jurisdiction. And somebody that old facing this many second-degree felonies is essentially looking at life in prison. That is grounds to be worried that this particular defendant might flee.
Well, it's certainly a concern in a case like this because the charges are very serious. And because these 4 defendants all waived their right to a preliminary hearing, which just for viewers who don't recall what that is, that's just where the prosecutor puts on enough evidence to show, look, we have probable cause that this crime was committed. And then the judge would say, yes or no, you've met that bar. And then it gets passed over to the grand jury. They're saying basically there's enough evidence to go to trial. They all waived their rights to that hearing after it was scheduled to go on, and then it didn't go on. There are more charges, though, that could be coming at grand jury. This case will now go to the grand jury.
Yes, the grand jury, people should know that grand juries can be investigating grand juries where they see lots of witnesses and lots of evidence and try to find out what's happening. Grand jurors can ask for other things to be brought before them before they hand up indictments. So we know that the children, many of them are in area hospitals being treated. As they get treated, those that are verbal and can understand will tell the tale of who did what or who didn't do what. And that information will be brought in front of the grand jury. You don't have to bring the children down to the grand jury. An investigator who spoke to the children can testify to the grand jury. So very likely there will be separate additional charges brought because every day you don't feed a child is another count of a second-degree felony, child endangerment. Every day that you don't care for a child is a new count. And so the prosecutors, if they wanted to, could stack the charges against the 4 of these adults and any other adults who may have mistreated or endangered these children.
Let's move on now to this new request from the prosecutor, Bill Archer. He filed motions basically asking for, filed requests with the court asking for the appointment of special prosecutors. Now, we understand that this, of course, is a huge case. Vinton County is a small county, the poorest county in Ohio, the least populous county in Ohio, or at least it's one of the poorest counties. He's asking that the actual county prosecutor of Highland County be appointed as a special prosecutor, also asking that the Attorney General's office and some of their assistants be added as special prosecutors. And this is raising a lot of questions. He's saying they need to be able to assist in the investigation and prosecution of this case. But this raises a lot of questions. Is it possible that the Vinton County prosecutor is going to simply ask that another county handle this? Because there are a lot of questions surrounding, were these people getting benefits? Were they getting any type of welfare benefits? Was Job and Family Services involved? I actually spoke to somebody who told me that Job and Family Services in another county had actually visited this family some time ago, and they had concerns, and that's why these people picked up and left.
Yes, I'm familiar with these statutes and these appointments, although I've not talked directly to the prosecutor to find out what his thinking was. I certainly know Attorney General Andy Wilson, and I know one of the new prosecuting attorneys, Annika Collins. She's the prosecuting attorney in Highland County, which is southwest Ohio. I've been a special prosecutor. She's appointed me to help her in the past. The statutory language is what you said, which is appointing someone to assist with the prosecution. But normally, if you simply needed litigation power, more people, more litigators, more prosecutors to work up the case, you would go to a larger county and you'd ask for assistance, or you'd assistant prosecutors. Or you'd go to the Attorney General's office and ask for more assistant attorneys general. The notion of appointing the elected prosecutor of Highland County, Annika Collins, as the special prosecutor suggests that perhaps the Vinton County prosecutor is going to step aside from the entire matter, fearing the appearance of a conflict because in Ohio, the prosecuting attorney represents the county agencies in civil actions. So if there's a concern that there might be a civil action against the Children's Services Department and workers in Vinton County, it would be the job of the Vinton County prosecuting attorney to represent them and give them legal advice, which could present a partial conflict. So that would be my best guess, not having spoken to either Annika or Andy about why, in fact, this request for appointment was made.
Yeah, it's an interesting request to be made. I can understand wanting, some reinforcements and some help, the assistance, of course, because this is a big case with 16 potential victims. There may be more victims, we just don't know. But it is a complex case. Another thing we've got going on here.
Let me just make one point, Angenette, that I think we ought to touch on. We're not sure that this will be one trial or 4 trials, which would make it much more difficult if it's 4 different trials. It's not a guarantee that all defendants would be tried together. It's possible that they may have interests diverging and their rights diverge, and they might need to have separate trials, which would make it very complicated, and many different assistant prosecutors would have to be involved. So you're right, it's complicated. It could get even more complicated depending how many trials there would be.
Mark, there are all these questions now about what actually led the investigators to this house. There's a search warrant that was executed for a so-called parallel investigation. It doesn't sound like this has anything to do with drugs, from what the little bit I'm able to gather from this and glean from this, that it's not related to drugs. You and I wondered about that early on, if there was some type of drug component to this. But we know that Gary Jr. was, charged with 4 misdemeanor counts of public indecency at the home. The warrant's not related to that either, the original warrant that is sealed. So what on earth could this parallel investigation be about?
Yeah, if it's not drugs, and it's certainly not going to be the public indecency, those are misdemeanors, the charge gets brought, you hear the case, it's a rather quick matter. We're speculating, of course, it could be some level of Medicaid fraud, some kind of fraud relating to welfare. Somebody with this many children is almost certainly collecting benefits for these children to be able to feed them. Whether they're feeding them or not is a different question. So we're speculating, but it's certainly not going to be high-level organized crime with people who have low IQs. You simply don't see that. People can't function well enough to be able to maintain a giant conspiracy. So we'll find out sooner as we get closer. The fact that the defense wants to waive preliminary hearings suggests that they don't want the evidence to come out now because they know all eyes, including the eyes of the jury pool, are on this case.
Elizabeth's brother, one of her brothers, her older brothers, has indicated that he kind of ratted somebody out. Like there are all these posts on Facebook coming to light, and he talked about Elizabeth being possibly indoctrinated. What do you make of that? Because it sounds like she didn't really have a lot of contact with her family until recently.
Often in these cases, other relatives will have tried to solve a problem or feel mad about some other issue, some long-standing family dispute. And now they come out and say, look, I told them. I know what's going on here. And it's on social media, and we all know how careful we have to be with what's being said on social media. This continues to be an odd tip of an odd iceberg. We all know there's something under the water. We just don't know what it is and how far down it goes.
Also, what's very interesting is that one of the relatives of Christina Siders, Ronnie Fletcher, told a local TV station, they're horrified by this. They were kept at arm's length. They would get a call asking for money sometimes to pay a utility bill. They gave them a car like a year ago, things of that nature. So it sounds like the extended family had contact with them, but maybe just not as much contact to know that these kids were living in such squalor.
Yeah, if this group of adults was able to hide the children's living conditions from neighbors who see the house every day, it certainly wouldn't be hard to hide it from relatives who live far away. here's hoping that there will be other family members who will be able to take these children in, so they don't all have to go into the foster system. But with every abused child, the first need is to make sure that they are taken care of physically and medically, getting them into a school system where they can begin learning with their peers. And that process that starts right away for all of them, including the 18-year-old.
Most certainly. It's a crazy case. These kids have social media profiles, which is another weird part of this. Apparently they have phones, and they were able to post on social media. That's my understanding. I'm very confounded as to how these kids are kept in squalor, but yet they have access to phones to post on social media.
Yeah, I have been in houses in Appalachia, and I have looked at lots of crime scene photos. And although the majority of houses there are nicely kept and people doing all the right things by their children, I've been in some really squalid houses, and the people live there for years. They feed their kids right next to where they feed their dogs, and there's stuff everywhere, and it's not all that unusual. I mentioned earlier the number of children born to this woman is shockingly unusual, but squalid conditions in very poor areas happens more often than we'd like. And so they were doing something. We're going to find out more. We don't know how verbal these children are. Prosecutors need to have witnesses. That's the next big step for the prosecution team. Interview the witnesses.
Yeah, there are more questions right now than answers. And really the most important thing is these children getting the care that they need. Mark Weaver, thank you so much, as always.
Yes, thank you.
Now, after I recorded that interview with Mark Weaver, we learned that Gary Siders Sr.'s bail has been modified to a $300,000 recognizance bond. This comes after he was taken to the hospital on July 7th, as I mentioned earlier, and transported to another hospital for more specialized care. The state is now going to pay for his GPS monitoring once he's released from the hospital. The remaining Siders family members remain in jail on those $300,000 bonds. We'll, of course, continue to follow this case for you and bring you the latest information. That's it for this episode of Crime Fix. I'm Angenette Levy. Thanks so much for being with me. I'll see you back here next time.